Shabbat Shalom. I hope you're keeping well. We are going to be looking at the topic of who is Israel and in the light of Messiah and how we should root ourselves into the people of God. I've been challenged about this more recently. I listened to a debate with Dr. Brown in it and a guy called Gabriel, and it was quite feisty, but all good in the end. I think these things need to be wrestled with. And hopefully I can give just a God-fearing opinion. This is how I see it, and many who are from the nations, not quite the replacement idea or the transferal idea that many from the nations have with the Gentiles, but also not the exclusivist view of Messianic Jews as well, that no, Israel, there is an adopted son, or you to have a different category of Israelite in a sense, and to understand that. So what's important is just to realize in Genesis chapter 35 that right back there, Israel, Jacob, is given a wonderful blessing, and there he is told that a nation and a company of nations would come from him. There would be two sides to this fulfillment from the start, and we mustn't gaslight each other. The nations must not say, well, concerning that nation, you're the synagogue of Satan, your father is the devil. Messiah said the kingdom would be taken from you and given to another. You are of the Antichrist system, you don't even believe in the Son of God, you're enemies on account of the gospel, cut off, all of that. And similarly, those who are of the synagogue, or those of the circumcision, the Jewish nation, they must be careful on what they make of the company of nations spoken of right back there. Even after Peter had his vision, many of them would just say, well, he's given them, they're clean for salvation. They can qualify for salvation now. And it's like, well, thank you very much. Not quite, no, you're part of the covenant now. You can partake of these things. The Jewish people, they were not too keen on the idea of this being extended or broadening, or what we call the enlarging of the nations, that it would go to the Gentiles, as it were. But we get this in Mark 11, when Messiah said, his house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, that we read right after that, they actually wanted to kill him. And I don't think it's because of the den of thieves part. I really think it's because he was referring to nations are going to come in here, they're allowed to come close. And he's quoting Isaiah. There should be no problem with this. Isaiah foresaw a time where the covenant would be for even these, and they could basically worship no differently to Jewish people. And I think Paul really understood this, how the unclean became clean for this. And it's interesting that it was on the temple that they were trying to get him, and they saw him with a guy called Trophimus, and then Paul relays his story, and he's got a whole story about how he met Yeshua and all of this. And it's interesting, there was no problem with that. We think the issue was just who Yeshua was as the Messiah. No, it actually says, and he said, Messiah said to me, depart, for I will send you from here unto the Goyim, the nations, the ethnos. And it says, and they gave him audience until this word, and they lift up their voice and they said, away with such a person from the earth. It's not fit that he should live. I was listening to this debate between Dr. Brown and Finocchio. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And it was interesting that I'd say the most heated part of it came with regards to 1 Peter chapter 2, 9 to 11. And I was quite surprised with Dr. Brown's interpretation, because I've always read about you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a people belonging to God, to show forth the praises of him who has drawn you out of darkness into his wonderful light. That this was about me. I think you could apply this to all nations. Dr. Brown was saying, no, this is exclusively Jewish, and that 1 Peter was written for the Jews. And I've been meditating on that a bit. And particularly, I think the fear of allowing the nations to belong to that statement is because from Exodus chapter 19, it says that these words you shall pronounce upon the children of Israel. Now, there are a few problems with this. The first problem is so often Jewish people keep saying, we have never been disowned as a people, though we have individually messed up. God has never annulled his covenant with us. That's the first problem, because it describes these ones as not a people, and now through Messiah, they are the people of God. The second issue is that when it's speaking about the people that were in darkness, this is Peter referring to why Messiah would have his ministry up in Galilee, that up there, and also in relation to Isaiah, that there would be an enlarging of the nation, which again, I think would allude to the Goyim, or the nations, as being appropriate for 1 Peter chapter 2. The third issue is the not my people, not my loved one, or not have mercy on. We know contextually that this was not about the Jewish nation. So from a Peshat reading, you should always try and read it in its plain sense rather than just think this is being interpreted for Jews. And then also when Dr. Brown would say that contemporary scholars are seeing this as for the Jewish people, it's not quite true, and what you see is those scholars are all Jewish. Okay, it's David Stern who wrote the Complete Jewish Bible. It's Arnold Fruchtenbaum. It's Moshe Rosen, Dan Juster. It's coming from the Jewish side of the family, and they're prone to their own biases. And in fact, the more contemporary scholarship is saying that no, this was written to at least a mixed audience. Some would even say no, it was a predominantly non-Jewish audience. And I would even go so far as to say we know that this scripture is not about the Jews. And the reason is because we actually have the not my people, not my loved one, or not have mercy on. It is interpreted by Paul in Romans chapter 9, verse 25. We can read there that no, this is about the nations, and he describes in both ways, even us whom he called not of the Jews only, but also of the nations. And then he quotes Hosea saying, I will call them, the nations, my people that were not my people, and her, the nations, beloved, that was not loved. It shall come to pass in the place where it said to them, the nations, you are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. So Paul was, he was clearly seeing a group referred to by Hosea as representing the nations here. And so we should all ask, who is Hosea referring to? Who was Hosea talking about? Well, when we go back to Hosea, we can see that, interestingly, Hosea is talking about a brother nation to the Jewish nation. He's talking about a people that were to the north, the house of Israel, what was a kingdom to the north of the Jewish nation, and that Hosea was relating how these people were exiled to Assyria through successive deportations, and it was them who were divorced from God. The covenant was taken away from these people, this brother nation, and that these God-forsaken Israelites, as it were, who were cut off from the covenants, that these are to be the ones related to the nations, which is a bizarre idea, but we need to understand how Paul got to there. So the first thing to just emphasize this is that when we talk about there's a part of Israel that's been divorced or taken away from the covenants, we're not talking about the Jews. We are talking about specifically the group that was called the house of Israel. So in Jeremiah chapter 3 we read, during the reign of King Hosea, the Lord said to me, have you seen what faithless Israel has done? She's gone up on every high hill and under every spreading tree and has committed adultery there. I thought that after she had done all this, she would return to me, but she did not. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. I gave faithless Israel her certificate of divorce and sent her away because of all her adulteries. So Hosea was writing about this northern kingdom, a non-Jewish portion of Israel, and that they became not my people and on whom God did not have mercy. But to understand why the Jewish men, Paul and Peter, they would apply this singular forsaken kingdom to the nations who clearly have zero pedigree as Jacob's seed, we need to realize that Hosea had another child called Jezreel. And Jehovah said to him, call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. So Jezreel means to scatter. It means get out of here. However, this punishment, it was not like the punishment that was put on the Jews in their exile. This was a disowning, divorce, a cessation of covenant. These would go into utter darkness, as it were. These ones would be removed from their heritage in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, destined to be removed from the Sabbath, the festivals, eating clean food, and they would consider the law of Moses a strange thing. So they completely lost their identity. However, although Jezreel, it seems very gloomy, it would also have a great promise attached to it, because Jezreel also means to sow. So to the end of Hosea chapter 1, it says, yet, so even though utter destruction, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, they were made of Gentile status, or just of the nations, non-covenant status. It shall be said to them, children of the living God. And the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together, and they shall appoint for themselves one head. It's referring to Messiah. And they shall go up from the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. So I really believe Paul and Peter, they realized that the Jezreel sowing for this principle for a greater harvest would be manifested through the rejected side of the family. Thus, although the new covenant is made just with Israel and Judah, the nations may stand in the covenant through the rejected nation. The problem with God's people all around is that we read the scriptures really without realizing the story of Israel, the story of greater Israel, and this greater story in the background. And we often think about the Jews of that first century as not being aware of the state of their nation, even as all these other nations through Messiah were coming to believe in the covenant and share in the goodness that has flowed from Israel. And really, I think it helps now if we can read, just to know that Romans chapter 1 to 9, Paul's talking about the Jews, his side of the nation, as it were, and how they've stumbled and made mistakes and this and that. But he then, towards the end of chapter 9 through to 11, he starts using the term Israel more and more. And this is to deal with the broader idea of Israel and being conscious of the greater understanding of who was cut off and who wasn't cut off. So let's read from Romans 11, and hopefully this will have a new understanding for you. For I speak to you nations, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the nations. I magnify my office, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh. So you can't say which are of my covenant. So he's recognizing you Gentiles are of the same covenant, but there's a part of my flesh people that I hope would, and he uses the word here, that I might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciliation of the world. Where is this principle from? This is the Jezreel principle. What shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be cut off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if you boast, you bear not the root, but the root bears you. And you will say, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unfaithfulness they were broken off. And you stand by faithfulness. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare you not. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God. On them which fell, severity, but towards you, goodness. If you continue in his goodness, otherwise you also shall be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unfaithfulness, shall be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. So here we have this understanding, and I think this just reads so much better because it just never makes sense when we read of the Jews saying they've never been cut off or they've never been estranged from anything, and then are having to deal with natural seed cut off. And to also understand the faithfulness of Messiah. I think often we do not understand the grace of Messiah. And to understand that he is the covenant maker from the beginning. He is the messenger of the covenant. We are to understand his place from the beginning, whether it's Exodus 34, we see him in Judges 2, we see Malachi 3 as well. That no, the covenants are made through him. That's why in Ephesians 2, the description is that you of the nations who now partake in the commonwealth of Israel, you were without Messiah, without covenants, plural. So this comes back to Messiah, and we might say, well, he's rejected, so he was rejected, so he rejected them. But no, we see that this comes down to faithfulness. And in many ways, I think the Jewish people have been faithful to the covenant, treacherous in many ways. But Messiah, it's up to Messiah, and he's chosen to, from what we see in Scripture, to be in covenant and to not nullify anything with the Jewish people. It wasn't that side of the nation. But before we get all joyful in what we believe, let's read about those who wish to come into the Commonwealth of Israel. What we see within Yeshua's house of prayer for all nations is that it is very much a people who love the covenant and need to be faithful in the covenant. Also the son of the stranger that joins themselves to Jehovah to serve him and to love the name of Jehovah, to be his servants. Everyone that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it and takes hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. The Lord Jehovah, which gathers the outcasts of Israel, says, yet will I gather others to him, to Israel, besides those that are gathered unto him. It's one thing being drawn near, it's another thing being faithful in what we've been drawn near to. So I really pray for all of you that you'll see yourselves as in this covenant with Israel's God, that you'll be drawn near, that you'll understand your place, that you'll be able to walk in his ways, not for salvation, and that it would also be written on your heart, because there's no obedience unless it's on the heart, and he certainly doesn't want to force anyone to do anything. But especially in the light of Messiah, do we not get a sense of, wow, this God and the degree to which he would redeem and the degree to which he loves the world, that he would give his son. Sowed a son to reap many sons, sowed a nation to reap many nations. And what a privilege that is, that we can partake of that story and draw so near. So many blessings to you wherever you are. I pray you'll know your place in Israel. Pray you'll know how from the nations we are allowed to be a part of the story and that we don't undermine it. Many blessings. Shabbat Shalom.